Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the career seminar hosted by the Office of Graduate Education and Life and also WVU Career Services. We're happy to have two staff members of the Career Services this afternoon to share the expertise on CV, resume writing, and also letter writing. I want to remind everyone that there is a second part of our series, which is going to take place next Friday at 10 a.m. The topic will be on networking and also how to find jobs in the non-academic fields. And I hope you will sign up for that. Let's see, I talked about that. Okay, so I'm Dr. May, by the way. I'm Dr. May from the Office of Graduate Education and Life, if we haven't met. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'll be turning the time over to our staff from Career Services in a minute here. I do want to remind everybody that there is an evaluation at the end that we would appreciate your completion of it so that it will give us feedback on how well we did this afternoon, and also what you might want to hear more in the future. All right, so I am going to turn the time over now to Charlotte and Jessica. Go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Thank you so much, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Cagla, and I am here with my colleague, Jessie, Barclay. So we are from Career Services Center. We both are career development specialists with different areas of expertise. And today we will talk to you about a broad spectrum of resumes, cover letters, CVs, and the differences between these documents and how to create a competitive application package for different intents and purposes. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Thank you so much for filling out the surveys that was sent by Dr. May and the Graduate Education and Life. We've gathered so many valuable information from you in terms of what you wanted to discuss or hear from us in this specific presentation. I will say though, some of the questions were rather specific to your individual circumstances. So if we don't address them here today, we basically encourage you to schedule an appointment with Career Services to discuss those individual and specific things face-to-face with a career development specialist. And the other thing that I wanted to point out in this presentation, like I said, we've gathered the info and feedback from you, so we will try to incorporate those items or those questions as much as we can in this presentation. We will first start with resumes, then work our way into CVs and cover letters. So usually this slide we use for undergraduate level students to say a great resume takes 4 years to build. In your case, it's going to be obviously 4+ years given your level of education and level of expertise. So without further ado, let's move forward to the next slide and get into it.
And one other thing, we'll have a lot of time at the end for questions. So if you think of a question, go ahead and put it in the chat just so you don't forget. But we will have hopefully about a half hour, if not more, at the end just to answer specific questions. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. So we're going to start with the difference between a resume and a CV.
Yes, that's going to be in the front center of our discussion today. But before we get into the CV and resume stuff, again, I'd like to point out that a lot of you were asking about having built a career or experiences in academia and potentially transferring those things into industry and finding industry-related jobs. And I think it will essentially come down to the difference between a resume and cover letter, but also in common, how to tailor your documents to a specific position. That's going to answer probably a lot of the questions you have about how to go about transferring or basically making that switch from academia to industry. And Jessie will start talking about the tips about tailoring and basically how to go about this very important and integral process into your documents.
Yeah, we are going to talk about tailoring your documents a lot. And these tips go for both CVs and for resumes, as well as cover letters. So when you start going through the process of applying to either academic positions or non-academic and more industry type positions, the first thing you really want to ask yourself is, what makes me most qualified for this particular position? Strategically adding information from the job description is absolutely essential to the job search these days. And the reason is, most of the time, if you're applying to an online portal, you are going to go through an applicant tracking system. And that applicant tracking system, whether it's a CV or a resume, it's going to scan your document to make sure you have matching keywords from the job description. And then the recruiter is going to, whether it's academic or not, they're going to check and see what percentage of a match you have with your documents when you apply to that position. So when we talk about tailoring, we're talking about keywords, but more importantly, we're talking about you guys thinking strategically about your audience. What is the most important information that they need to know? And we're here to tell you today, there's no perfect way to put these documents together, but there's effective ways for the jobs that you're applying to. And we want to give you some of those strategies today. So you want to, again, make this very easy to find on either your CV or your resume, and you don't want to make the reader really look for it. For industry positions, they may only spend 5 to 7 seconds looking at your resume. And for non-industry, it's probably about the same because they're still getting just as many applicants. So it's something to think about. Anything to add to that, Chala? We'll do this a lot. We like to play off each other for this.
Oh no, that's perfect. I think you've given them everything they needed.
So what I want you guys to do, and you can use the chat for this, we're going to show you a job description. So we're going to go through a little bit of an activity. So here is a job description. It's pretty generic. It's just it's a full-time clinical research assistant. Some of you may be looking for things like this depending on your industry. What I want you to do is pretend for a couple seconds that you are a recruiter or someone who's hiring for this position. In the chat, I want you guys to add what you think are some of the key words or some of the key skills that the recruiter would be looking for in the actual resume. So if you guys can, in the chat, go through this and kind of think about what are those key skills they're going to be looking for. Or you guys can also unmute yourself and we can talk about it. We're pretty open.
Absolutely.
Yep. Our programming experience, absolutely. Coding, absolutely. Anything else? Chala, when you look at it, what do you think?
Well, a lot of things, because this lab is pretty specific to Parkinson's disease and tremor. So grant writing, yeah, Jana, that's definitely data analysis, correct?
Absolutely.
Same time, again, think about it from a tailoring standpoint. I may not have the exact Parkinson's disease and tremor experience, but if I had experience in the past working with other neurological maybe disorders, I can maybe try to demonstrate that and show the transferable skills between these two experiences. Again, oftentimes you may not have the exact same experience, but what do you do to tailor your experiences and make it look like it's a good fit to the job description is where it all comes down to.
And you also want to make sure that if you have the specific experiences they're looking for, it's typically on the first page of your CV and always on the first page of your resume. We don't want to go more than 2 pages on your resume, especially at this level for you guys. Okay, so we looked at this. This is an actual resume that we put together based off of that job description. And as you can see, we highlighted exactly where we put the keywords, the key qualifications, and the key skills. And if you also notice, it's in the first half of the first page of the resume. And that is what we mean by tailoring. You do not want to send the same documents out over and over and over again. You want to very specifically think about, strategically think about what it is you're applying to in the audience. So this you can say, and it's great. You guys actually hit the nail right on the head. All of the things that you guys said are very easy to find on here. Does that make sense to everyone? If it does, like a thumbs up would be really helpful. Or if you have any other questions, we are happy to answer that now before we go into, okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So that is tailoring. and it's important for all documentation. That's the most important thing we're going to talk about today. So that's why we started at the beginning.
And at this point, there are a few things to be said and talked about. Kind of going back to your questions in the survey that we did prior to this presentation, kind of transferring those experiences from academia into the industry. And unfortunately, there is not a cookie cutter blanket statement that we can't make. It's going to obviously depend on your individual circumstances, but at the same time, what can you do to indicate your past experiences and kind of gather those transferable skills and apply it in an industry sense? I think that's what you need to think about. In this example, for instance, you're not seeing an objective statement necessarily, but if I was a person who is trying to get into industry from academia, it's probably strategic for me to create an objective statement and saying something along the lines of seasoned academic with experience in X, Y, and Z. So those X, Y, and Z is the top things that Jessie was talking about. Looking to expand, again, this is a horrible, cheesy way of saying this, but looking to expand horizons or experiences in an industry setting by applying said transferable skills. So in that specific objective statement, you are basically indicating that you have all the experiences and all the skills, or most of them at least, needed in the industry, and that you would like to apply your academic skills into an industry setting. And that's really important to be able to do.
Yeah, and a lot of times for the objective statement, you're really only going to use it if you're changing industries or if you're going from academia to industry. The objective other than that is typically not used because the experience speaks louder than the objective. So that's just, I'm glad you brought that up, Cagla. That's really, really helpful.
On the experience piece, I think we wouldn't do our due diligence if we didn't warn you about this, is that if you're thinking about making that switch from academia to industry, there will be a lot of jobs, especially if you're looking into more like entry level, that will be kind of intimidated by your experiences, especially you're at the PhD level and even in some instances master's level, right? So you need to be prepared. You need to prepare yourself for those types of reactions. Again, you will be deemed overqualified even though you'd be okay with the position, and they may be a little reticent about considering you for the said job. So you need to basically both mentally prepare yourself, and maybe it could be a good thing to address in a cover letter or maybe in the objective statement, like I mentioned, and we're going to get to cover letters here in a second, but it is something, it's the reality, again, if you want to make that switch, and we just kind of wanted to touch base with that earlier on.
Perfect. So now we'll go into resumes.
So resume, again, it is derived from Latin and it literally means short, brief, okay? And you only have one page your story in most industry standards, although depending on your level of experience, if you can fill 2 full pages with really tailored and relevant information, it would not be the worst thing in the world or end of the world, but obviously 1 page is what we recommend. If you're going to do a 2-page version of this though, be strategic, and like the example we've given you, the most relevant and kind of important experiences should be in the first half of the first page. Yep. And that's really important. The other thing, I mean, factual, honest, it's kind of a given. It needs to be easy to read. We already talked about the tailoring piece and obviously the importance of it. You need to highlight relevant education and experience. And you need to consider, okay, what is this resume going to be utilized for? Obviously, most of the time industry, because they want a resume over a CV, and strategically create this document to what it's intended for. Again, I don't think we need to belabor a lot about this, but do you have anything to add to the resume piece, Jessie?
No, this is the slide we use for every resume presentation, regardless of the audience that we're speaking to. One thing to just be aware of, we do not have a perfect formula for what font you need to use, anything along those lines. Just be smart about it. Never use Comic Sans. and always try to make it look as professional as possible. And honestly, that's kind of the basic guidelines on resumes.
You're all academics, and I would probably follow an APA style with that too. Although 12 font size may be a little too big, but try to stick with Times New Roman. And you can go as little as 10.5 for the content if you're trying to cram everything into a one-page document. So let's talk about the CV. And in this case, this stands Latin for course of life. So it literally builds or kind of expands as you gain more experience. I've seen CVs in the past that were like 25 pages long for really, really established faculty members and professors in the field. And it is not, there's not a page requirement, but I think if you're just getting ready to graduate, it would be appropriate to keep it around like 5 to 6 pages maximum. And obviously you will want to include your academic, scientific, and research accomplishments, any types of like fellowships, grants, and doctoral programs, and your advanced experience, training, and qualifications. It's basically, we're going to touch base with the differences, but one essential point here is that this is literally the course of life, and resume is what we call brief.
Yep, that's exactly it. Okay, so this is again what is common. We've gone over the tailoring. We will continue to go over the tailoring, but make sure again, one thing we haven't talked about is the freedom you have in section order. So again, there's no perfect way to have different sections, but there's effective and ineffective. Effective is if you're applying to a research position, having your research experience listed first. If it's a teaching position, list your teaching experience first. That's what we mean by moving those sections around. That's the same in both resumes and in CVs. So that's something really, really, really important to consider. The other thing is you have a lot of freedom on what you title your sections. I work a lot with ag and natural science students, and fieldwork experience is very important for most of them. And so we typically on their CV and their resume will add a fieldwork experience section. And that again is very much up to your industry. And that's something we can continue to talk about later.
And the reverse chronological order, a lot of people get hung up on that and list everything in a reverse chronological order, which kind of defeats the purpose of having the relevant stuff at the top. So whenever we talk about reverse chronological order, it only applies to within each individual section. So when you have the research experience section, those experiences should reverse chronologically ordered. And then if the teaching position comes after that, and there are some of the like most recent experiences you may have had, it will still go after the research experience, if that makes sense. And we'll talk about the jargon being appropriate here in a second, but these are some of the, most common similarities between resumes and CVs.
And just one other note, because I get this question a lot, do not worry about the gaps in history per section. That is not necessarily even that important anymore, as long as you're qualified and you're letting them know how. So do not worry about those gaps in your work history. Okay, here we go. So which one do you need?
Well, always obviously follow the instructions that are given to you in the job description, or whenever you hit the URL link to apply for the specific position, they specifically indicate whether they want a CV or a resume. For those of you who are wanting to make the switch to industry, just know that a 5-page resume is not going to fly in the industry. It will never work. But at the same time, a 2-page CV may not be favorable either. So you need to basically gauge your audience and then touch base with the important bullets that we've indicated under each item and follow the lead on that. And again, follow their instructions on that in terms of which one you actually need to use. Give them what they request is the golden rule of thumb.
Absolutely. And just kind of like to put things in categories even more, most of the time when you're applying to jobs, industry is going to ask for resume, like Chala said, and academic is going to ask for a CV or research-based or medical. Doctors have CVs. That's definitely how they show their publications and their experiences. That's a good way to just kind of think about it. Okay. So now I'm going to take them to the website.
Sure.
So I'm going to stop share and then reshare. And there we go. So at Career Services, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Always have to check. So at Career Services, we've realized over the years that the Microsoft Word templates do not work when it comes to creating an effective template for either a CV or a resume. So we've worked with industry leaders, we've worked with professors to kind of create a good template for most industries for you guys to use. Now you can use as many of these as possible. They're available on our website. You scroll down, we actually have the resume templates here. Charlie, which one do you want me to click on?
Honestly, any one of them is fine. Maybe do the engineering internship-based one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So again, I'm going to open it as a PDF. You can open it as a Word document and then download it and make it your own. It doesn't necessarily have to be based on the industry, but those are good guidelines for you to follow. So here is just the internship-based one. For a lot of you, if you're doing STEM, you may want to move your skill section to the top. It just depends on what industry you're in. A few notes on this. We are not encouraging you guys to put your physical address anymore. We no longer receive interview notices via mail, so they don't really need it on your resume. Usually the city and state will work, and that's pretty much it.
Or you may consider switching that with your LinkedIn profile. And one of the reasons why we don't recommend the physical address is because of the security concerns. Just internet is, made it accessible to everybody that, they can see your home address, and you don't really want your home address to be lurking around in different platforms for safety concerns. A LinkedIn profile should suffice in most cases, and depending on your industry, if you do have an online portfolio, for example, or maybe a website that contains all your publications, etc., that would be a good substitute as well.
And if you're more in a creative or a design like landscape architecture, it's absolutely okay to have a lot of your portfolio also on your LinkedIn. Or if you have your own website where you do have your virtual portfolio, you can add that to the top of your resume as well. That is what a lot of people in that industry do. So there's lots of different options. Again, I won't get into the nitty gritty, but it's just something important to think about. What were some other things we wanted to cover on this, Chala?
I think consistency, as you can see, that if you are listing the dates on the right side of the page, they all need to be listed on the right side of the page. There's no zigzagging, there's no confusion there. Like we mentioned, there is not a perfect formula for any one of you to have the sections ordered in a specific way. It's going to really depend on your individual circumstances. And you can get, more creative with what you title your section names. Especially at academic level. Obviously, this is a basic undergraduate level resume. You will probably have related experiences or relevant experience instead of just work experience. You will probably not have a whole lot of extracurricular activities, and they will be substituted with publications, honors and awards, recognitions, and research experiences. Just note that you need to basically make this page as readable, legible, as easy as possible. Be consistent and keep it easy and simple, again, if this is a resume. CVs, on the other hand, while we have an example for you on our website, one thing that I always recommend people at this level is I'm sure you have favorite professors or researchers that you're following, people you look up to. Everybody's CVs is accessible on their website, or like when you research a professor on the university's website, they have it wherever his information or her information is listed. So download their CVs and see how it's basically formatted. It should give you a lot of insights about the specific industry you're in and maybe the specific field in academia that they're in. And I mean, they're established people, so they must be doing something wrong. And I would also use their template as an example and a good guidance for myself.
Absolutely. We use this tactic a lot when we're helping students get into PhD programs and master programs, but it also works in the industry. So I will say sometimes their formatting may not be the easiest to read, but that's where the sections are going to be helpful. Use your discretion. That is going to be the most helpful thing for you. Again, as you can see on the CV, we start with education on both of them because that's typically going to be the number one qualifier for whatever job it is that you're applying to. For this one, this is we're going to assume they're applying to a research job. So research experience is listed first. They put the research assistant, and they also added their internship where they did research. If you are working with a professor, not necessarily as an assistant, but you're just helping out, you can also list that. That's really important for you to think about. And teaching experience.
Differences, Jessie, sorry to cut you off, but again, these documents are subjective, and ultimately this is your own document and you need to add your personal touch to it. So we have this template, but if I were to create a CV for myself, and if I'm applying to research related positions, I would probably put my research experience first and then my publications.
Yep.
And probably the teaching experience towards the bottom. So again, there's going to be a lot of personal tastes and differences, and it's okay to have those things. Again, nothing is set in stone when it comes to these documents. You just need to read your audience, make sure that you are tailoring it as much as you can.
And another thing, you can add professional experience. Don't be afraid to do that just because it's not related. A lot of times if you're moving from academia to industry, those even part-time jobs or full-time positions that maybe you had before have even more translatable skills in the real world. So don't think that you don't need to add it. Always think to yourself, what makes me most qualified based on the job description? And then you can kind of move forward. Another thing to think of for both the resume and the CV is to have a running resume and CV with everything you've ever done. Save that document, and each time you apply to a position, you can open it and edit it based on what it is that you're applying to. That's one of the best things ever.
Yeah, you can just crop sections from it and paste it into a new document based on relevance. That's just a very recommended practice, I will say.
Yeah. As you can see, this one was long. If you notice, we do put references on the CV. It is not something we encourage you to do on a resume unless they ask for it. So again, always follow the instructions, but rule of thumb, typically on the CV, you can add those references. Anything else for this one, Cagla?
Not really. I think go back to the slides and
yep. Okay. All right, let me know when you guys see it. Perfect.
All right, well, key sections. We already covered most of this, but as you can see, some of the sections that you should absolutely have is obviously your name and contact information, education. If you have work experience, you can either advertise it as professional experience or relevant experience, again, especially if you're thinking about that switch into the industry. Extracurricular activities in this case may not be a student organization for people of your level, but again, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they could be more grant writing experiences or different certifications and trainings that you've gotten on campus. It could be different collaborations with different professors or faculty members. But I think one thing that should be constant for both documents is the skills section. At this level, they're going to hire you for the technical skills that you've built through your education, through your academic development. And it's really important to specifically indicate a skills section, both on your CVs and on your resumes. In my opinion, it's non-negotiable.
I agree 100%.
And then the CV add-ons is basically you're going to keep everything from the resume, and to make it into a CV, you will add the following sections on the right in terms of areas of interest, which is not something that we have in the resume section, but in more academia jobs, it's something that is strategic to include, but at the same time, don't confuse it with hobbies types of interests, because resumes, CVs, cover letters, these things differ based on different countries. So for example, areas of interest may indicate actual hobbies in Europe, and it's a section that you are expected to put. But in this context, it's more like a research interest, your area of interest within the field, within the professional field that you're in. So don't confuse it again with hobbies. I see a lot of people include that, especially international candidates. Make sure, especially for behavioral and social sciences fields, liberal arts fields, where the funding is heavily reliant upon you, to highlight your grants, grant writing experiences, because it's really more important for certain fields than others. And it is a section that you should absolutely include, again, if it's a desirable skill in your specific industry or in your specific academic field. Obviously, we talked about publications, presentations, different memberships. And like Jessie mentioned, one thing that's also different in this two documentations is that in your resume, you shouldn't even have a clause that says references upon request, because it just wastes your valuable real estate. They know that it's available upon request, it's not needed, but at the same time in your CV, whenever you're applying to academic positions, you should have all your references, their contact information, their titles on your CV. And that's very important, and make sure to kind of note that distinction.
So on both CVs and resumes, we highly encourage you guys not to use paragraphs. And the reason that is because time is of the essence for everyone, and they're not going to take the time to read a whole novel of a CV or a resume. So short statements indicating, and we'll go more into what those bullets need to be involved in. But one thing that we have on our website is an action verb list. No I statement should be used ever in either document. You want to start those bullets out with action verbs. We do have a comprehensive list on our website. This is what it looks like. And it is really helpful. So you can go, okay, I want to talk about my management skills. What verb can I use for that? And that is one thing that I think is really helpful for most students, regardless of where they are in their career.
And kind of piggyback on what you said, Jessie, it's been my experience that especially with PhD level students, whenever they have their CVs, they create a lot of I statements in long paragraphs. Please don't do that, because the business professional format calls for, regardless of whether it's a CV or a resume, that you start with an action verb and then use a passive voice as if you are describing somebody else's experiences. And don't be hung up on whether or not the bullet should fit in one line or kind of leap into the second line. It's not important. Like, I literally had that question a few days ago. The most important thing is that you start with a strong opening, a strong verb, and then make the bullet as comprehensive with how do I say this? Like I was reviewing a personal statement yesterday and they were trying to cram so many different ideas in one specific sentence that I was getting lost constantly. At this point, we all know that you are academics, you accomplished a lot, and you don't have to try to demonstrate that within these bullets. In both of these documents, simplicity is the king, in my opinion. And the simpler you keep things while still using important jargon and knowledge in the field, you're going to be good to go. But don't try to overcomplicate and demonstrate your level of intelligence or accomplishment by making convoluted and difficult sentences. Easy is the king. So remember that.
Direct to the point and tailored to the job description. That is what we always say. Awesome. So here are a couple examples. We'll go through these on how to write better bullets. We also have this on our website, so as a reference, you can kind of go back. One thing that happens a lot, our students will really try to be as direct as possible, but miss a few things. And one of those is making your bullets measurable. I like to add numbers. Numbers help me as the reader understand what you've done in the past, which usually indicates what you're capable of in the future. So let's just say, again, this is more of a freshman type thing, but helped manage children at a summer camp. That literally tells me nothing. It could be like a 1-week summer camp. You could have helped one child, but if you add more important details, managed more than 250 children, give me their ages and a whole week, I know you're capable of so much more. And so giving those details are absolutely essential, and quantifying those experiences, making it measurable.
And in your case, you do a lot of research. There's a difference between conducting a research with a sample size of 200 versus 1,000. Again, that could be a measurable thing. There's a lot to be said about this specific thing in terms of analyzing data, conducting the research, being able to describe that research in a more measurable way is going to definitely set you apart from your competition. And again, specific questions about this may be too personal to be discussed in this presentation, but there are effective ways of describing your research and describing your academic or industry experiences. So we, again, as a shameless plug here, I'm going to encourage you all to schedule an appointment with a career development specialist on that.
We also want to be as specific as possible, and this is where we can really use the jargon from the industry, and again, continuing to tailor to the job description. So communicated with clients and work to achieve their needs tells me nothing. If you're looking at this and you want to ask yourself how, if you're looking at your bullet and you can even ask yourself, how did I do that? You need to add more details, if that makes sense. So a more specific, communicated levels and grades of drainage structures to achieve excellent customer satisfaction ratings. And if you have the percentage of your excellent satisfaction ratings, you can quantify that and the reader will know how great you did. I learned a lot more about what this person is capable of and what they've done in the past. Be specific.
And for you, again, going back to, I'm going to give some research examples, even though some of you are looking into industry, but conducted leadership research tells me nothing. But if you can basically be more specific and research the correlations between perceived employability and turnover intentions as a control of leadership traits, utilizing X, Y, and Z software to make the connections. Like if you can, again, be more specific, it's just going to tell me a lot more about your research capabilities and what your research is. It's just going to give more information and add more substance to what it is that you're doing.
Always answer the how did you do it? That is going to be another one of those questions you want to ask. You want to be objective. We see over and over and over again people writing things like experienced verbal communicator because they're trying to tailor their resume and the job's asking for an experienced verbal communicator. But again, we want to know how. So if you've done presentations, If you have been at a conference and actually presented one of your papers, talk about that. Talk about your audience, talk about how many people were there, and talk about what it was you presented on. It's really, really important. In fact, if you do that a lot of you probably do present posters or research at different conferences. Add a conference section to your CV. And if it's super related, you can add it to your resume as well. Again, remember your audience and what it is that they're looking for.
And that transferable skills aspect that I was kind of talking to you guys about earlier, public speaking, being experienced verbal communicator, kind of being able to speak in front of large audiences, guess what? It's going to be an applicable skill in industry as well. So there you go. That's your transferable skill that you can basically take from academia and then present it in a more industry setting too. And those are the different connections that you should be looking into in terms of what did I do in academia that is transferable into the industry. So that's a great example of that.
And again, accomplishments, if you were great at whatever it was you did, especially if it's research-based, talk about it. Talk about what you accomplished, and expand on it, quantify it. I don't think we can say that enough. Any other things you want to add here?
I mean, not really. It's just like, yeah, you've done all this research, but what was the purpose in order to accomplish X, Y, and Z? I think it's particularly important in a research sense to be able to make those connections for your reader, especially if the reader is not, I'll get to that. Let me not get ahead of myself in a second, but yeah, basically focus on accomplishments too. So you did this to do what in order to accomplish what, and it's very important to make that connection. Let me just stop there.
Perfect. We've talked a lot about references already. Honestly, again, just make sure you have them on your CV. Be strategic about your references. Have it be people that are going to talk about you, your research, and your academic achievements in the best possible light. And always remember to ask them if they want to be your reference. That is just something in order to be professional. Yeah.
Keep them updated in the process, because you may have asked them like a year ago and they said yes. Don't expect them to remember that a year after, because the worst thing that can happen is them receiving a phone call and just being taken aback by that. It's really strategic to keep updating them. At this point, you should have a whole lot of faculty references in your toolbox, a lot of maybe mentors, a lot of advisors, know the difference between personal and professional. And again, we're not going to preach you about this. It's more of an undergraduate level concerns, but follow the directions in terms of how many references that they want from you. And yeah, just basic rules, just keeping them updated, I think, is the most important thing. And just a little side note, make sure whomever it is that you use as a reference has only good things to say about you. Sometimes they're going to say yes, but be brutally honest and even give away some maybe shortcomings, maybe an interaction. So ensure that they are an advocate and in your corner, and not just the faculty member reference that would look good on paper, but not in practice. Because I've seen instances of where this type of scenario unfolding, where the faculty member is renowned, but unfortunately they had mixed reviews about the candidates. So just a little side note here.
I like that. Okay. So cover letters are so important in industry. And the reason that is, so cover letters, honestly, historically, were put in front of a resume when you mailed your resume in to actually apply for a position, because that's how we used to do things. But now they've taken a different turn. So a cover letter provides a written document of your actual writing skills to an employer, whether it be academic or not. That cover letter is going to let them know how good of a writer you are. It also is going to let them know, did you do your research on the job, and why are you interested in working at this company? It should never, ever be the same cover letter to every company or for every job. you want to take the time to make it compelling to them, which is talking about why you want to work for them. That is the most important thing you can think of for a cover letter. And I mean, Chala and I have been looking over cover letters for our graduate assistant. And if they didn't talk about why they wanted to work for career services, I did not give them a high review. That is so essential, that you talk about why you want to work for the company and tailor your experiences. You guys have so many different things you've done that make you qualified for these jobs. Choose one or two, expand on it, and that's pretty much what we do.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But with the caveat of, at this point, most of you are used to writing lengthy documents.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
To get into the graduate program. And oftentimes it's been my experience that graduate level students write lengthy cover letters too. Again, please don't make that mistake. If you're specifically it has to be a one-page document. And if it is more like an academic type of job, they're going to ask you different things, obviously, like your like teaching philosophy or writing samples, or maybe even a personal statement instead of a cover letter, which you already probably know the difference because you are graduate students. But make sure to kind of keep it to a page and follow the examples we have on our website. The second thing that I like to point out here is a lot of students, graduate or undergraduate, fall into this trap of recapping their resume on their cover letters, which I personally hate too. I don't want to see something like, in my position as an intern for Career Services Center, I was able to review resumes, cover letters, and work with the Associate Director of Career Services to accomplish X, Y, and Z. So what I'm doing here is literally recapping everything bullet by bullet from my resume to cover letter. My God, what a waste of space. Document serves not only as a good writing sample for the employer, but also this is your chance to make a strong case for yourself of, okay, what do I have as a candidate in terms of qualifications? What are the job requirements? Like Jessie was saying, the top 3 to 5 really important qualifications. And how can I specifically talk about these select few things and make the connection for the employer that I have what it takes and that I would be a great candidate or great person in this position. So something like, I understand that this position requires someone with extensive project management experience. In my professional career, I've taken various roles managing projects with X, Y, and Z, and therefore feel confident in my ability to successfully manage projects in this position. So that's a great and very specific example, and you should do that for a few other critical things for the position rather than literally reiterating your resume item by item. I hope this makes sense, this thing.
And another thing, no, that makes, I thought it made sense. And another thing, for those of you who are transitioning from academia to industry, you can also talk about your interests and how important it is for you to actually make that transition and why. The cover letter is absolutely when you can address that. So if I look at your resume after I read your cover letter and I see everything is based in academia, but I know why you want to move to my company and use your skills from the indication you put into the cover letter, it's going to make so much more sense. And I'm going to be excited about it as a recruiter. There are so many different things that you can tactfully do with your cover letter. Again, you just want to be strategic about it. That is really, honestly, besides tailoring, one of the most important things we're going to talk about today is just being strategic. Think of your audience. Okay. So applying to research or academia. What were some things we wanted to cover on this, Chala?
Well, you just need to make that distinction of, is this for industry? Is this for research or academia? And that's what we've been talking about this whole time. So think about what are some of the things that will bring me on board, like how am I a good fit? And if it's a more research and academia type of position, you need to discuss, again, in your documentations or even in your interview, your previous collaborations, department faculty you know. You need to think of yourself as a colleague whenever you are addressing into research and academia. And whenever you're writing something to industry, you should consider yourself as a candidate and not as a peer yet. That's one of the main distinctions here that we wanted to talk about. And again, this research of the organization is regardless of whether or not it's an academic organization or a private organization. If it is a university or a research organization, you need to basically check their staff profiles, like their CVs, their current research and missions, because the critical job or task for you to accomplish here is how do I tailor my own research, those of the institutions and their current research missions? Like, how do I kind of draw that parallel versus in the industry? Even though most of my experiences are in an academic setting, I have a lot of transferable skills that will help me succeed in this position. Again, making that connection of I have this and I'm going to be competitive. So that's basically what we wanted to kind of get across in this specific slide here.
We've talked a lot about this as well. I love that we already covered this. Again, tailor it to the institution's needs. Know what, if you're applying for an academic position, look up what research is going on in that department. Talk about it. Talk about why you're excited about it, to be a part of it. That is so essential.
And the other thing that I want to mention here is that if you have been in academia and wanting to make that switch to industry, you may be in an awfully technical field, and please don't make the assumption that in the industry, the person that will first read your documents will be familiar with your jargon and terminology. Oftentimes the HR people are trained to be familiar with these types of distinctions or industry related jargon. You can't keep it awfully technical for them. So you need to, again, understand your audience and make it, simple for at least the initial screening. And then hopefully once you pass that initial screening with an HR person, the hiring manager will be someone of your own industry and of your field. Like, for example, if you're an engineer, initially the HR is going to be dealing with you, not the head of the mechanical engineering department in that organization. So once you pass the initial screening, again, you can't, these are very specific things where you may need to schedule an appointment with us, but at the same time, once you pass that initial screening of, okay, this fits every single box and I was able to understand their cover letter and resume, let me pass this to the hiring manager that is a seasoned engineer. Well, in that case, go crazy with your technical knowledge and jargon, but till that point, you may want to write something that is applicable to everyone and anyone that might be reading those documents.
Absolutely. And I love that you always use mechanical engineering, because I was a recruiter for General Motors in my former career. And I was one of those people that did not know a lot about engineering, but I knew how to look for the right candidates. And that's what a lot of these people are doing. So that's a lot of the main differences between industry and academia. Sometimes in academia, the academics are looking at it. In the industry, that's not always what's happening.
Sure. Yeah, like we mentioned before, in teaching related positions, you're going to basically have a lot of conversations about your teaching philosophy, highlights from your past teaching. They may have you come in and do presentations in a classroom for you to basically demonstrate your distinct teaching examples, approaches, classroom management. If you've taken any awards or recognition for your teaching abilities, that's something that should definitely be on there. But again, we covered this like for so many times now that we don't want to. But if you have any specific questions with regards to this, you are welcome to direct that in the chat function.
One last thing I do want to actually show you guys how to do before we go to the QR code and answer questions. I am going to stop share and reshare. I would like to show you guys how to set up an appointment with Cagla or I, or your specific career development specialist. There we go. So on the Career Services website, everyone has access to Handshake. This is what your Handshake should look like when you log in. There's a lot of different features on Handshake. We won't go into all of that right now, but if you go into the Career Center, if it works, you can click appointments, schedule a new appointment, and you should be able to go through that process pretty quickly. So it's a really easy way to set up an appointment with us. We do virtual and in person. So we're making it as easy as possible to help you guys with your documentation.
You're going to see WVU main campus here, not Tech Berkeley. It's
yes,
just,
I'm not a student, so it doesn't come up properly for me. So.
Yeah.
And you will have access to our up-to-date schedule in real time. It's pretty great.
Mhm.
So while you guys are starting to come up with some questions, here is the QR code that you can use. Do you guys see the QR code? Okay,
yeah.
Just making sure. I can't tell sometimes. If you just, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. You guys can download that. Start with the post survey, and also in the chat, you can start asking your questions, or let us know something you learned from today so that we can make this better or feel good about what we did cover. You can use the chat for both of those functions. What did you learn today, as well as do you have any specific questions? Thank you, Betty, for putting that in the chat.
Okay, good. How to write the bullet points. That portion was really helpful for Katya.
Awesome.
Yeah. How to be measurable, specific, objective. Again, there are effective and ineffective bullet points. I don't want to be dramatic here and give you a McDonald's example, but we all know everybody flips burgers and mops the floors. But if you say something along the lines of communicated effectively with upper management and coworkers to create a positive work environment, you're essentially indicating a transferable experience and something you've done in McDonald's, but it's not necessarily a mundane daily task. So I'm glad the bullet point portion was helpful to you.
Can you send the link for making an appointment? It is all through Handshake. I can put the Handshake link up, but essentially you're going to log in with your mixed credentials, and you can actually go to the Career Center there and set up the appointment. When will the recording be up?
Recording access, Betty May, a question for you.
Yes, I will answer that. Yeah, once it's downloaded, and I will send it to every student who had registered for this seminar.
Okay, perfect. So in a few days.
Yes.
At most.
So I'm going to add to the chat the Handshake. Okay.
We have, in the meantime, a question from Zaki. So I'm applying for postdoctoral positions, and they want me to email a resume, a cover letter, and 3 references. What could be a good way to list the references? So this kind of goes along with, again, if it's that postdoctoral position, chances are it will be a CV. They will require you to have a CV. And in this case, your references should be listed as the last section of your CV. If you're asking who would be a good reference, well, obviously at this point, it would be your advisor, like PhD advisor is one of the good references. If you can get different references from various professors and faculty members that either served as a mentor to you or taught your classes, or maybe you were involved in some type of research, those would be great resources or great references as well. If I am I will hopefully be in the academia in the future, and if I were to apply for postdoctoral positions, I doubt I will list anybody but faculty member individuals in my references. Like I wouldn't probably post my former managers if they're limiting it to 3, and I would probably make sure that they're all from academia and from the research circles that they're interested in. Hope this answers. Perfect. Amir has a question as well. For internship positions, when there is no preference over CV resume, what would you recommend? I think a CV would be better because it contains more information and keywords that can be found during the candidate's selection process. Loaded question, Jessie. Do you want
Yeah, so one thing I will ask, what industry are you in? Amir, that it depends very much on the industry. If you are, let's say, in engineering, I would still absolutely encourage you to use a resume format and not necessarily a CV. Chemistry, the exact same thing. So you can do a 2-page resume, but you want to make sure your skills are listed after education in chemistry, especially your lab skills and techniques you've learned in the lab. But also that research is going to go in there depending on the job. It's a loaded question because we need to know more about you to give you really good advice. So this is one of those situations where I would highly encourage you to set up an appointment with one of us, and we are happy to go through the job description with you and really talk about how to make that resume the best it possibly can be for that particular position. Sorry, I know that's not the best answer or not what you wanted, but that is exactly my best advice.
Well, you're correct, because that resume or CV will look significantly different if it's a position, an internship in a research institution versus working at Procter & Gamble.
Exactly.
In an industry setting, again, using your chemistry skills, it's going to look very much different, and it will really depend on, again, the position you're applying to.
I hope that helps. Sorry, it's not a direct answer, but that is definitely what we're going to say at this point. Do you guys have any other questions? These have been really good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll also turn on my video. Okay.
Yay, we can see your face.
So I have about another year and a half until I graduate. I'm in the psych department. And I'm probably going to be applying for postdoc positions like before I graduate, hopefully, and get one, set up and everything. But I was just wondering, like, do you guys offer career services things like all year round, or is it only during like the fall and the spring, or is it also like during the summer and stuff like that?
Literally all the time. We sometimes take vacations, but it's not like that's just how it works. Yeah, we're available all the time and after you graduate. So if you do, we do help alumni as well. So if you are getting in your postdoc and you're just wanting some more info, need some more advice, that's why we're here.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, because and I was wondering like what you guys would recommend. Like I don't really have like my CV and stuff. Like I know I need to change it, and I'm not looking to apply to anything yet. Like I said, I have another year and a half, but like how early should I start working on these materials if I'm like not applying to other jobs? Like do you have any suggestions about how often you should update your materials and stuff like that?
That's a great question. And the answer is these documents are living documents. And their presence or their existence should not be contingent upon when or where you're going to be applying for a position. Go ahead and start a running CV and running resume for you and include every experience, every skill, every certification within that particular document and keep adding it. Like if you learn how to use a specific research or stats software, add it on there. If you participate a training program or maybe a conference, add it on there. And then later on, whenever you are kind of sorting out the postdoctoral positions that you're interested in, cut different pieces and formulate the answer. I mean, not the answer, the particular document that will be the most tailored for that specific organization and for that specific postdoctoral position. So the question is, now is the time. It takes time to kind of put these things together and make sure that you're not missing any vital and critical information. That would be the best piece of advice that we can give you.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I know you guys mentioned something about like having a LinkedIn profile. Like I don't even have a LinkedIn profile because I've just been a student this whole time, but it's like, I was like, oh, I should probably get started on that. So even if I just wanted to start it, like I don't have too much to put in it yet because I'm not finished my studies here, but like, would you be able to help me with something like that?
Oh yeah.
And those types of things, because I don't know like how to make an effective profile, or and if I want to like continue to add things to my CV, you could also help me with that. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That is literally why we're here.
I'll see you guys around then.
Yeah, you're around.
We also just got another really great question that goes with that, which is, you know, when you're saving all of your documents, what's a good filing system for the documents? And if you're going to upload it somewhere. So a couple of words of advice that has been really helpful for our students. And even when I was a recruiter, I noticed it helped me when people did this. Always apply with a PDF version of your documents, because then when whoever is opening it, they are actually not going to, they're going to see what you intended them to see. It's not going to mess with the integrity of the document. And when saving that PDF, you want to have your name, the company, and possibly the position title or number. It's going to be long, but it'll help you make sure you're using the right document, sending the right document, and people who save it are going to have a better time, easier time, actually differentiating it. So does that make sense to everyone? Save it as a PDF with your name or last name, company name, and job name or job number. You do not have to put resume, but if you want to, let's say that you are actually submitting a resume, cover letter, and your references as 3 separate documents, absolutely add that. That does help. I hope that helps.
Usually in the application system, there's going to be specific sections for each document. So for example, for resume, it's just going to give you the option of, okay, browse documents here, and it's going to literally upload that specific document into the resume section. If their application system is set up such that it doesn't give you that option, it would not hurt to name also the document as resume. Like for example, San Nicolas resume, PPNG, X position would be a good, again, it may be a little long, but it would not hurt to have more explanation.
It'll help you keep things in order, especially in your own files. We definitely encourage you to put, to have a file for your resumes, to have a running resume and a Word document, and then when you submit it, make it a PDF. And no, your name first is not necessarily important. Sometimes people prefer that. Again, it's to keep you organized. There's no perfect way to do it.
Mm-hmm. But I would probably put my last name, CYK, and then resume and PPNG, or the job number if I need to. It's just going to depend on my mood, if I'm being honest. Like there's not a exact cookie cutter answer, but create different names, see which one you like best. Again, it's not going to make it or break it at this point, but which one helps you keep things organized a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is submit the wrong document. You spend all this time tailoring it and you send the wrong document to the wrong thing. Yeah, that doesn't look good. So
especially the cover letter where you talk about the company and why you like their position. You don't want to send that accidentally. Company.
The recruiter will laugh and that will be the highlight of their day, but that's not good for you. That's what we always do as recruiters. Sorry. Any other questions?
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you guys for being here today. to benefit from this presentation and the content that we have shared with you. Just remember that, again, there's going to be a follow-up seminar next Friday covering the topics of networking and job search process in both academic and non-academic fields. If you, again, have any questions, any concerns, we have shared the handshake information. You can go ahead and schedule an appointment with us. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been so much fun. Thank you guys so much. You're always a great audience.
Thank you, Jessica and Cagla.
Yeah.